Annual New Feminist Research Lecture. This lecture series was launched initially by Dr. T.L. Cowan to highlight cutting-edge feminist research of contemporary, non-tenured faculty and public intellectuals who are making significant contributions to national and international debates in the field. Dr. Cowan is Assistant Professor of Digital Media Cultures in the Department of Arts, Culture and Media at the University of Toronto. And I just want to give you a sense of this lecture series. I'm going to let you know who the past presenters are so that when you meet Praba, you'll know the company that she keeps. So the first lecture was by Dr. Ilya Parkins. She's the WGST coordinator from UBC Okanagan, and her talk was entitled Timing Femininity in Christian Dior's Self-Fashioning. So looking at Dior's fashion is actually autobiographical. Then we had Dr. Jasmine Ralt, who's currently Assistant Professor with the Institute of Communication, Culture, Information, and Technology at U of T, Mississauga. She presented a talk on mediating affect in the queer Americas, cases of creative resistance, about affective approaches to justice building through creative street activism. Trish Salah, who is Assistant Professor in our sister program at Queen's University, spoke on gender struggles, trans-organizing, trade unionism, and radical communities, linking transgender justice to the struggles of working class and colonized peoples around the world. Dr. Tiffany Mueller-Murdahl is now Senior Lecturer in Simon Fraser's Gender, Sexuality, Women's and Urban Studies program, and held the Ruth Wynn Woodward Chair in Gender and Urban Studies there, while serving on the board of the national organization Women Transforming Cities. Her talk, Emerging Feminist Urban Futures, outlined the vital importance of bringing feminist urban social development practice and product-driven policy approaches together. Then, writer Melanie Schnell presented a talk on her research in Somalia and the writing process for her award-winning novel, While the Sun is Above Us. Her talk, recounting the truth of war through feminist fiction, emphasized the power of feminist writers to bring the lived impact of diverse women's realities to public consciousness. Dr. Mary Bunch, coordinator of Women's and Gender Studies at McGill University, presented on Julia Kristeva, Disability and the Singularity of Vulnerability, illuminating Kristeva's lesser-known work as a critical disabilities activist. Dr. Manuela Valle Castro, who grew up under the military dictatorship in Chile and completed her PhD through UBC's Gender, Race, Sexuality, and Social Justice Institute, gave a lecture on performance as activism and utopia in the Americas, exploring lines of convergence and difference between social movements in Latin America and performance activism in Canada, including an address to the Idle No More movement. Last year, Eleanor Sunchild, a proud member of the Thunderchild First Nation and member of the Saskatchewan Bar since 1999, presented her talk on the impacts of settler colonial violence on Indigenous women, addressing the continued legacies of the Indian Act, the residential school system, and the 60s scoop, and the genocidal impacts of Canadian colonial policies on Indigenous women. Tonight, we are fortunate to have with us Dr. Praba Pilar, a diasporic Mestiza Latin American woman from Colombia with a PhD in Performance Studies, Feminist Theory and Research from the University of California, Davis, and a postdoc in Digital Humanities and New Media from the University of Winnipeg. An award-winning international performance artist and scholar, Dr. Pilar draws on an impressive transnational portfolio to mobilize critical creative methodologies in the fields of women's and gender studies, performance studies, international studies, digital humanities, and new media in efforts to challenge passive participation in technologics. Before I outline the title of the lecture and performance, I just want to say that between the lecture and the performance, there'll be a 5-minute break so that we can reorganize the technology and prepare for mobile filming and lighting, etc. So please stay in your seats, talk amongst yourselves during the transition, and if you need to use the washroom, you go through, you bear right out the door, across the stairwell, across the drawing studio, and to your left or right. So, Dr. Pilar is going to be presenting a talk and a performance tonight under the title Situated Embodied Resistance to 21st Century Necro-Techno-Colonialism. This combined lecture and performance, both of which address how contemporary necro-techno-colonialism adapts the salvation narrative to instrumentalize faith, using the doctrine of discovery to undergird a global apparatus of surveillance capitalism that converts biolife into an extrajudicial colony in service of ruthless intensification of control. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Praba Pilar.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's been a real joy to be here in Saskatoon. I got to live in Winnipeg for 4 years and be very engaged with Urban Shaman Contemporary Aboriginal Art Gallery. I am colombiana, mestiza, soy muisca, de la gente tairona, que hablamos chicha, just to get that clear. And I really am grateful for the indigenous people and the indigenous lands that I'm standing here on, and the generosity of sovereign nations letting me come in and be here. So thank you. And to the individuals that have really helped with me being here. So, yeah, technology. I really focus on looking at the logics of the specter of technology that we are in right now. And the reason I want to look at logics is there's a certain logics that underlie colonialism, and a lot of people don't see that those same logics are activated right now in our contemporary technological lives. A lot of people see the contemporary technological scenario as one of liberating possibility. And I really see that the corporations, the really strong ones, continue to use the framework of the doctrine of discovery to undergird their global apparatus of surveillance capitalism. And when I talk about the extrajudicial colony, it's looking at Membe's work, which I will get into very soon, the South African post-colonial scholar. And most importantly, I want to talk about resistance and resistance through embodied practice. So I've been working on issues of technology since the very first time I heard of Monsanto Corporation. And so these are some images from the work I did starting around 1997 on seed sterilizing technologies. And I formed a group of superheroes, of artists, activists, and all kinds of folks in between. And we were superheroes against Monsanto, and we had a website because we use their tools to take them down. So we were artactivist.com, we hosted the Seed Collective and the Red Balloon Collective, and other things I won't get into. And I was here like super eco girl or eco hero, and there was all kinds of folks involved in this work. We were part of a global campaign to stop seed sterilizing technologies, and that it was able to block Monsanto, that campaign. Now, of course, Monsanto, being part of the international government and the WTO and all these things, was able to do it later. But the work together across international movements was very effective, and it was great to be part of a global movement in '97 and '98. Of course, this resulted in this kind of thing for me. But you really cannot put a good woman down. That's my 1998 arrest. I continue working on technology issues, even though I really don't want to. And I really mean it, I don't. There's a lot of other things that I would rather spend my time working on, but 21 years later, I think that what I thought was a matter of life and death, like the end of safe seed farming, has become much more of a matter of life and death. So I want to share these recent findings about the scale of the planetary technosphere, because I think most people are not aware of the scale of it. Perhaps you all are, but these are recent findings. This is from November 28, 2016. Yeah. So the technosphere is 30 trillion tons. It's 5 orders of magnitude greater than the standing biomass of humans. The number of techno-fossil species now outnumber the biotic species. For every pound of human flesh, there's at least 1 million pounds of human stuff. And the techno-fossil diversity may already exceed total biological diversity of all of Earth's history. So, the article is in the bibliography at the end, if you want to take a look at it. It's complex measurements, but I think it's alarming, perhaps, to really get a sense of where we're at with this. So, one way that I look at it is as a machine, right? And this is something I published in 2016 in an article and with a video of 21st century techno-colonialism. And so these concepts of Western superiority and modernity and coloniality, and progress, democracy, what a great idea. Who hasn't? Give me some, please, bring it on. I studied development as a Columbian in my youth. When I was 17 years old, I went to university to study development theory, and I'd studied for 3 years until I understood that it meant all this, and quit that field immediately. And the perpetual war and the way democracy is just a spectacle and not actually helping people, and how technology really encompasses so many of these narratives that we're all familiar with, right? And then on this side is my decoding. These are my attempts to decode and undo and disrupt, hopefully not be in jail too much more. Anyway, so decolonizing epistemic disobedience, so not following the way that Western universities tell you to do things, or the Western educational system. Like the most interesting thing happening that just happened last month is in Chiapas. The Zapatistas are having their second meeting with scientists from around the world to move forward, and they're doing it in a very disobedient epistemic way, which is fantastic. Unintelligibility. As a performer, I disrupt, and it's through these crazy poetic ways, which I'll show you in a minute, trying to disrupt the norms of this monstrosity. And then, as a performer, I want to infect because infecting people is part of the bad world. And I'm already part of the bad world because I'm a Colombian Mestiza, right? So I'm already dirty in many people's minds, perhaps not the people in this room. So I like to use that term of disease vector infection with a refusal to participate in our own destruction. You know, whether or not we're gonna endure, I'm gonna at least fight, right? Because I don't know if we're gonna endure at this point, but nobody else does either. So I'm not alone in that. So today I'm really gonna focus on this article I just published, where I'm trying to just see it through this juxtaposition of these two scholars, this heroic indigenous legal scholar and this post-colonial scholar, and her work on the doctrine of discovery as a framework of dominance, and his work on the necropolitical. So I'm going to read a little bit of that article and see how that goes. Because written texts are often not to be read out loud, but we'll see. So I like to improvise, so even in talks. So looking at these two figures, what I'm talking about with techno-colonialism is the logic in which capitalist technoculture is rooted. Extraction. It's extraction. Enacted through violent colonization. So that's what they have in common. Extraction and metaphorized, so as discovery and salvation. So Tanya Ganella Fritzschner of the Onondaga Nation wrote about the 1455 papal bull Romanus Pontifex as providing the conceptual structure that legalized and legitimized the domination of non-Christian people by monarchies of the Latin Christian Church. So that is the document that established the doctrine of discovery, to which Fritzschner absolutely calls not the doctrine of discovery, the doctrine of Christian discovery. That's in the essay in the bibliography at the end. So this doctrine established in international law the legality of, quote, unlimited resource extraction, particularly mining, within the traditional territories of indigenous nations and peoples, close quote. In the colonization of the Americas, the Latin Church, the Pope, the monarchs, and the conquistadores utilized the doctrine of discovery, as many of us know, to enslave, torture, and try to destroy the human and non-human worlds for resource extraction. And it's at whatever cost, this resource extraction. Fritzschner analyzed the extension of the doctrine of discovery into a framework of dominance. In the 1455 Romanus Pontifex, because it granted colonial powers divine rights in perpetuity to, quote, grant, discover, subdue, acquire, possess, and permanently control non-Christian indigenous people and their resources. So those words, grant, discover, subdue, acquire, possess, control. Present-day discourses and practices of the techno-capitalist sector use the same exact concepts of discovery and salvation to justify extractions. And they may not tell you, like, I believe in all this Judeo-Christian narratives, but they're in a culture that does, and they're bringing forth those ideas without being necessarily religious. They may even be atheists. It just remains rooted in these westernized faith-based attitudes. And this paves a way for an acceptance of the discovery, right now, acquisition, and possession of all biological life forms. So, in particular, I'm looking at Silicon Valley, because on top of the greed and these narratives, there's an embrace of American exceptionalism. Though, why not? We're so great. Why not? Why not make a dinosaur? Why not make a mastodon out of DNA? Right? And they're asking him, why would you make a mastodon right now? Because we can. Why not? And it's like, because it's a terrible, terrible idea. What are you going to do with this mastodon that you're bringing back to life? And they're like, because we can. Why not? We're the U.S. You know, we're number one. So this reinscribes what Membe describes as, quote, narratives of mastery and emancipation, most of which are underpinned by Enlightenment understandings of truth and error, close quote. So I think what's happening right now is it's expanding the necropolitical from colonies and enslavement into a global population far outside of national boundaries or state identities. And when the U.S. National Science Foundation was writing and reporting in 2005 about the new convergence of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive neuroscience, how the convergence was capacitated. So advances in each field accelerated production in other fields, and it was very interrelated, and it would create rapid acceleration. In fact, they thought it would create a major phase change globally. And with this convergence, technology corporations are now seizing the rights to acquire, possess, and dominate biological life through information and communication technologies, genomics, and artificial intelligence, while imposing a necropolitical global state of siege that does not distinguish between the external and internal enemy. And one area is the field of data mining, because it is expanding exponentially. And with data mining, we're the resource. We're the resource. And Fritzner's framework of dominance is very directly applied to every individual in any given space. So in 2006, I developed a church. Well, I heard about this publication in 2005, and I read it, and I studied the field, so I thought, well, I should just join right in, man. I should join their organizations, which I did, and go to Silicon Valley and go to the consumer, what is it called, the Computer Science Museum, and go to all these meetings, and really, I actually had a card that said I was the Reverend of the Church of Nano Biinfo Cogno. And the people that met me did not realize I was ridiculing them to their face. They were like, great, we need our own church. And I'm like, but you are the world's church. You don't understand. And so here she is. Okay, so this is the DNA, and this is the cognitive neuroscience, and this is the robotics and the info, and these are nanotubes. And, it's just, pray to the gods, and, these are our new gods, right? And so here's the first supper of the singularity. Now I have to admit, because I was initially the Pope, but I felt kind of trapped as the Pope, especially because people respected me too much. So then I thought, no, there was too much respect going on. I need to be a reverend, like a Baptist, sing-alongs. Believe me, I had to do research because I'm not in any religion at all. So I'm like, wow, what do they do, these churches? And I learned, oh, this is sing-along. So we sang like Amazing Grace and Husband the Sound that came to save us, technology, changing all the words. Sometimes people left the performances as a result. But these are all the founders, right? And they actually make believe women are not part of this world. And it is a homosocial world where it makes believe that there's no woman involved, like this guy with the DNA making believe that he didn't work with a woman on that, which he did, and all the rest of I'm not even going to name them because I'm so tired of them all. Now, I think this is one of the Baptist ones. I don't think I was, but by the way, I then became the Messiah, because this was also too limiting. And it just wasn't getting at it. But people would come and they'd engage, and I painted my face silver so that, I was just a non-person, I'm just project whatever you want on me. And I would always have altar girls who were very fun and participating, and people would come, and as you can see, they'd act like they act in churches, and I didn't ask them to do that, they just got really carried away. And so this was in a museum, Center for the Arts at Urbana for 4 months, and I would just go in, they invited me to make my chapels. I actually went and bought pews and everything and did a real church, and then I would just perform in there. But by this point, I was more alarmed and we're not really getting it, so I'm this degenerate cult leader at this point. Really disgusting. I don't even use a microphone. I started using a microphone. I don't use microphones. But I was just so decadent that I would whisper. So people had to really try to find out what this strange, deluded, Messiah was talking about. And they did. Audience members who I'd never seen before in my life came forward and, absolutely engaged in ways that absolutely surprised and shocked me. These are also altar helpers. I don't know, with this new structure. And then, for instance, here's an audience member getting tattooed, but fake tattoos, with the church logo, which I had on my forehead and on my hands and they had and everything. But some audience member I've never seen in my life is spontaneously chanting in binary code. I'm like, who even knows binary code? I mean, I do, but and this person is just super penitent because she owns a cell phone, not a smartphone. And so it was really an interesting project, the church. And it did a lot of things. Performances, tracks that were in other shows, street theater. I did a performance across the street from the Empire State Building because they brought me there, and I'm like, sure, why not? And interacting with jaded New Yorkers about, but I was able to convince some of them, Religion 2.0, because I was talking about Revolution 2.0. I won't go that much more into that. So I retired this project a couple of years ago because I felt like it had its lifespan about the convergence and what is happening with the convergence and what is happening to us, and it's about being in a cult. It's really just directly, this project was about, you're in the cult. What are you going to do about being in this cult? And for instance, people were, in this performance, I refused to speak to the audience for a while because they're disgusting meatware. And, I want software and hardware. What's this repellent? And they had to communicate through my phone. And it was painful. Like, people are like, we're in a cult. Yeah, got it. Like, what? You know? And it's like, yeah, what? What are we gonna do that we're in this technological cult? So I retired this performance and am now working more directly on just the necro-techno. And so I'm looking much more at the consolidation and the intensification of power and knowledge. What I'm really interested in is how they're trying to control the behavior and reality of populations. So I'm looking at directly, more specifically, at the practices of big data that is nullifying social and political sovereignty. And in looking at that, I've been looking at Shoshana Zuboff's work, and she's a business historian and an economist, and she works on computing businesses out of Harvard. And she kind of explains it pretty comprehensively that what's led to present-day ubiquity is few individuals understood how the technologies worked. The public trusted the companies, I'm talking about 20 years ago, without an awareness that the systems being developed held undetectable surveillance capacities. Within a very short time frame, these technologies were institutionalized across the labor force and ubiquitous in the social arena. Once ubiquitous, fatalism about loss of control set in due to, quote, the rapid buildup of institutionalized facts. This is Zuboff. Data brokerage, data analytics, data mining, professional specializations, unimaginable cash flows, and they are quite unimaginable. I think Jeff Bezos is #1 again, billionaire, and it's just kind of, he just popped right back up again in the Forbes list. Powerful network effects, state collaboration, hyper-scale material assets, and unprecedented concentrations of information power. Close quote. That's also Zuboff, which is in the bibliography. Zuboff points out that the problem is that most users have never understood that as computers produce data, they record data in every single case. So when you're using anything on your computer or your phone or your tablet or anything, you are the data. And too many people really don't understand that, especially with data banks, you know, that record every single thing you've done on Facebook since you first logged in. And some of us have done some regrettable things on that. And it is still out there. Somewhere in a server. And it's very hard to erase. So just to, I really think, like in 1995, I just want to go through this, how fast this happened. In 1995, less than 1% of the world's population was online. Less than 1%. Within 10 years, the figure was 15.8%, and 1 billion people had internet access at home. 5 years later, the 2nd billion was reached. 4 years after that, the 3rd billion. And it's like there's such an astronomical adoption of incredibly complex systems with very little end user expertise. Internet trackers, which it's very easy to find, Internet Live Stats, it's populated every minute. You go to internetlivestats.com and you can just kind of see what's going on very quickly. They estimate there are presently 50 billion devices connected to the internet, and almost all of them can potentially gather data. And it doesn't sound that alarming, but it is. Because, like, if, like, all kinds of devices are sending data out about what people are doing. And we know we don't want that, and perhaps I will talk a little more about that in a minute. So Zubov's recent work on surveillance capitalism analyzes big data as a technology that not only predicts human behavior for marketing, but controls human behavior. Her recent articles on Google, Facebook, and surveillance provide a roadmap of how computing moved into the reality business under the framework of dominance. Quote, Facebook's evident interest in mastering the mechanisms of emotional contagion, like Google Glasses, self-driving cars, investments in everything from the wired home to drones and satellites. Yeah, Google's in the news today about the equipment they're providing for the US drones that are dropping bombs. And satellites, Google's tagline was "do no evil." Those interesting words. And satellites, wired homes to drones and satellites share this purpose: to influence and shape human behavior along the lines that feed their bottom line. It is not control of behavior while engaging in virtual reality, cyber experiences, or the online you. It is control of, quote, Zubov here, the digital you as well as the actual you. The scene is changing from virtual reality to, well, reality. Close quote. That's Zubov in 2014. There are numerous actors beyond Google and Facebook that are working with artificial intelligence to modify human behavior. In 2016, 122 surveillance companies were registered in the United States, varying from the unfamiliar like Variant, NICE, Systems, Cosmos, Trovicor, Hacking Team, Neosaw, Vastec, Palantir, to the much more familiar like AT&T, Vodafone, and Comcast. So I just want to mention a few things about Palantir and Cambridge Analytica to really concretize how this is happening and how this is seizing biopower from modern states, obliterating sovereignty, and intensifying the commodification of human existence. Palantir, founded partly, of course I put a Spanish accent on everything, it's probably not even said that way, but Palantir, founded partly with funding from the CIA in 2004, counts among its clients now the National Security Agency, the CIA, the FBI, other branches of the US Defense Department, and I haven't done research on what Canadian agencies are involved with them, but I'm sure plenty. Co-founder Peter Thiel, of course he has last time I checked, he was worth $3 billion. He's also the co-founder of PayPal, which tracks the hell out of you too, but all right. Was the first outside investor in Facebook, still sits on their board, and donated $1.25 million to the Trump campaign, and also was on the transition team. So that company created the data integration and analysis system XKeyscore. And what that does is it collects and analyzes emails, chats, web browsing traffic, pictures, documents, voice calls, webcam photos, web searches, advertising analytics traffic, social media traffic, botnet traffic, logs your keystrokes, does computer network exploitation targeting, intercepts username and password pairs, file uploads to online services, Skype sessions, and more, close quote. The average user who is not doing anything illegal and therefore assumes they have nothing to hide has no idea of the extent of data being collected on them. And they have not given consent, and they also generally have no idea how easy it is to run analytics today. Like, this wasn't easy to do 20 years ago. Today, XKeyscore makes running data analytics and finding out, tracking what the hell somebody's been doing every single minute for the last 5 years is as easy as doing a hotel reservation. Now, of course, data gathering by these corporations for exploiting consumers is redeployed to identify and attack oppositional social actors. And that's the part that's deadly. So they're going after human rights workers, lawyers, political figures, and activists, along with tracing the use of French data tracking technology in torture and human rights abuses in Libya and Syria. Privacy International reports that in Bahrain, school administrator and human rights activist Abdul Ghani al-Khanjar was tortured while being confronted with transcripts of his text messages and details of his personal communications. That's from Privacy International, an organization that works on these issues. So this is devastating to the possibilities of human rights organizing through oppositional social movements, and really threatens any kind of democracy projects around the world. So Cambridge Analytica, the data analytics company that was written about in its relation to the 2016 US election and the Brexit campaigns, of course, they have their nice stakeholder, hedge fund billionaire, Robert Mercer, of course, the guy from Breitbart, the investor of Breitbart. Lovely people. Largest donor to the Trump electoral campaign. And the links between Cambridge Analytica, Aggregate IQ, the SCL Group, the lovely Palantir, the Department of Defense, United States and Britain, Facebook, Google, algorithms and consumer data sets from shopper loyalty cards to credit profiles. Like, it's that ridiculous how much tracking is going on. So in The Guardian, I'm trying to find the name of this person that was writing about this. Cadwallader is the name of the journalist. Writes in The Guardian, quote, Cambridge Analytica makes the astonishing boast that it has the psychological profiles based on 5,000 separate pieces of data on 220 million American voters. So, okay, fine. That's true in Canada, that's true in, all over the world. Its USP is to use this data to understand people's deepest emotions and target them accordingly. All right, so we know that these practices of understanding and manipulating target behavior are nothing new, obviously. We know the history of psychological behavior modification as propaganda, military psyops, which are psychological operations, behavior targeting. But these new messaging operations, data micro-targeting, psychographics, and what's now called biopsychosocial profiling run through this automated artificial intelligence, performs massive data analysis very rapidly. So because it's rooted in these military strategies, it has scaled mass propaganda into just a massive, widespread information warfare on the general public. Here is Cambridge University's Psychometric Center Director John Rust looking at this social media platforms and saying, with this, a computer can actually do psychology. It can predict and potentially control human behavior. It's how you brainwash someone. It's incredibly dangerous. It's no exaggeration to say that minds can be changed. Behavior can be predicted and controlled. People don't know it's happening to them. And then Jonathan Albright from the Tao Center for Digital Journalism at Columbia University, is looking at what are these network-based information warfare tools, and from viral sharing to behavioral micro-targeting. So he did something really cool. He ran data analytics on the networks themselves. So he went back on them and identified the interaction of so many different agents: Facebook custom audiences, domain insights, Facebook SDQ, Facebook Pixel, Google Universal Analytics, AdBlade, WordPress automation, WordPress daily activity. These were all warfare tools, and we're all using them all the time. And Albright's research reflects that these corporations are providing the means to actually change behavior. And biopsychosocial profiling is already impacting election outcomes around the world. So it's how the Necro-Techno-Complex is working right now. And it's a very dangerous situation where it's one thing to look at human behavior and try to advertise and sell to people. It's another thing for these corporations to be trying to and succeeding at controlling human behavior in a situation where there's how much more techno garbage per pound of human flesh already. So it's alarming. Something to really kind of attend to. And one of the ways that people in the field are looking at it, one of the things is I was doing free workshops for activists because I'm worried about activists. And they're not doing anything illegal, but they need not to have the state on top of them like that. And I had to stop doing them because to give an illusion of safety today is to lie. There is absolutely no way. There's too much recording going on. I did try to teach them there are audio recording devices on the street and on buses, and it takes 10 seconds of your voice biometrically identified through your cell phone to match it to a recording. You only need 10 seconds of your voice and identify your conversation on the bus or outside or in the park or wherever you are. And they're all over now. It's not CCTV anymore. There's also audio elements. And kind of warn them about these different aspects of how much data gathering is going on right now and how much this is impacting and making it very difficult for oppositional social movements. And so what I really look at is kind of this necro, the membe, like what is the necro-political, and how does Membe talk about the colony, and how does he talk about how the rule of law is used to enact violence and how the rule of law upholds the symmetries of freedom, and how, if we're looking at sovereignty, there's almost none left, and especially individual sovereignty. So Membe focuses on the state of exception, right? He writes about the state of exception of the actual colony, where the purported alien nature of the colonized justifies, this is his language, extrajuridical spatiality beyond the law. And so it's almost to the point where for the technosphere, the entire globe is the colony. And very few people are benefiting from it. Most of those people, by the way, have bunkers that you wouldn't believe. They buy nuclear silos that are decommissioned, and wow, they're gonna have to live with each other though. Good luck. Okay, so this leads to my new body of work, which I'm gonna show you now. This is the Necro-Techno, I call this the NoBot, because I'm not a robot, I'm a NoBot. And it's doing a performance that's touring right now where I'm surveilling the audience and filming them while only providing emoticons. Because that's our emotional range that's encouraged, right? It's just to be emoticons. But except mine are all evil. Because I'm the necro monster, right? The Necro-Techno monster. So this performance is very aggressive, and I crawl on people and force them to let me film them and deal with the emoticons. This is hair made out of the insides of computer keyboards that I pulled apart a lot of. And I will show you a brief clip of this performance. And the live show is way louder. So I'm going to wrap up by saying the NoBot project is, what is not a robot but a NoBot, is not trying to create some electronic technology to fight this situation, but to re-inhabit technologies of resistance that we already have, and to reimagine the technologies of resistance we already have, and to re-embrace those, and to be with the Zapatistas and the many people that are doing very good technologies of resistance and resurgence at this particular moment in history. And across where I'm from, corn is a method. And so it is the going to the maize that I'm doing as the NoBot, not trying to make some new device that I can use against the state. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So please stay where you are. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
I just saw the time. I didn't know it was that late. So it's going to be a brief performance, but but we'll be right back. Don't leave. Thanks.
Somos seres surgidos de la tierra, el agua y el maíz. De los ríos somos custodios ancestrales del pueblo lenca, resguardados además por los espíritus de las niñas, que nos enseñan que dar la vida de múltiples formas por la defensa de los ríos es dar la vida para el bien de la humanidad y de este planeta.
Batuapatsi means, all of the world's water.
Water is life for us.
Water represents life.
Water is life. Water is life.
El agua. Pero de partida el agua es otro ser, un ser vivo, un ser viviente más en la naturaleza. Pero después cuando pasa a ser como un vital elemento para mantenerse vivo, es un derecho colectivo de la gente.
The word for water in Cree is pipi, and our word for me is Nina in our dialect, and so that little sound really can mean life. So a lot of people use that slogan, water is life.
Water carries memories like computer cells, which is why when the rains come, say, thank you for visiting. Thank you for remembering, meaning water is memory. So you yourself contains not only your memories, but memories of your ancestors.
Indigenous people have a very deep connection and belief that all of life is sacred, and that the sacredness of our life comes from our first foundation, which is the water.
¿Por qué nos llamamos mapuche? Literalmente, mapu quiere decir tierra, y che quiere decir gente, gente de la tierra.
En este momento, los burros muertos que vivimos de caza y pesca, en el día ya todos sabemos que se ha muerto en nuestro lado, como si fuera como un padre o como una madre, ¿no es cierto? Eran de recursos para nosotros, para mantener a nuestros hijos. Entonces, lamentablemente, ahorita estamos como huérfanos.
There are a few things that have changed the water, and all of the changes that impact the river impact communities downstream. A little further up is the Gardner Dam. When you go downstream past Nipawin, Saskatchewan, is the E.B. Campbell Dam. Those two dams control a lot of the water over about 20 years. In the times when those dams were built, the water flow was constricted. At the same time, farms started draining their fertilizers and waste into the river. So that's when we started to see an increase in phosphate levels in the water in the Saskatchewan River. As you can imagine, all these different cities and towns that are on this waterway system put their pollutants in the water or their contaminants, and First Nations downstream feel the impact.
Que continuamos defendiendo nuestro lugar sagrado Wirikuta, de las concesiones mineras que pretendan destruir nuestros recursos naturales como una forma de vida ancestral, ya que nuestra causa es la protección del ecosistema como patrimonio de nuestra madre tierra.
La minería en México tiene una larga historia de explotación desde los tiempos de la colonia. Murieron miles, quizá millones de indígenas mexicanos en los socavones de las minas. Trajeron esclavos africanos para poder trabajar en ellas, que tampoco pudieron sobrevivir. Muchos pueblos de San Luis Potosí, de Coahuila, sobreviven con el trabajo de las minas a duras penas.
The most devastating impacts currently happening in New Mexico, impacting Laguna, Acoma, and Diné people of the Navajo Nation, is off-reservation uranium mining and milling development. Because these lands are located off federal trust reservation land, our negotiation input, our free prior informed consent as advised by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples is being infringed upon because we have no legal right in the consultation process. Therefore, we are powerless in this new wave of uranium development that will impact not only the waters in close proximity to the development, but off areas that are watersheds that flow directly through those three reservations.
No queremos presencia de actores armados, ni de multinacionales, ni de minería dentro de nuestros territorios, porque eso a nosotros no nos ayuda a la pervivencia, sino al exterminio físico y cultural de nuestros pueblos. No queremos más minas dentro de nuestros territorios, no queremos más fumigación, queremos vivir dignamente dentro de nuestros territorios y poder de esa forma poder crecer, ver a nuestros hijos y poder vivir como pueblos indígenas de acuerdo a nuestros usos y costumbres en dignidad.
Because actually they're destroying life, they're destroying the mother of all life. And which includes water as well, because that's part of the destruction too, because they're pumping all that water out. And once you destroy the land and the water, you're destroying life, including your own life, the life of your future, the future of your own children, your grandchildren, and so forth down the line.
Tienen que entender que los dueños de las tierras no son los gobiernos, sino somos los pueblos indígenas, y nosotros sí queremos compartirlas, porque nuestra costumbre es comunitaria, pues.
Acá el tema económico, ellos quieren negociar a costa de nosotros y a costa de nuestra cultura. Lamentablemente, si eso se llega a concretar, aquí va a haber más muerte y va a correr más sangre, pero no un afán de lucha, de querer golpear al otro, sino un afán de defender ese espacio y ese territorio y esa cultura. Realmente el gobierno, con sus instituciones, en este caso la Fuerza Armada a través de carabineros, invade las comunidades y las reprimen a través de allanamientos y persecuciones políticas. Realizan montaje a los dirigentes de cada comunidad para detenerlo y aplicarle una sanción que la cual consiste en 10 años, en este caso lo que aplican ellos es la ley antiterrorista, siendo que el pueblo mapuche no hay ningún terrorista, solamente está defendiendo sus derechos.
Aquí no se distinguen los niños, no se distingue nadie, sino lo que hacen precisamente es disparar sin pensar de que esto produce efecto, digamos, a terceros. ¿Te das cuenta de lo que es todo esto? Todos esos gases, bombas lacrimógenas, balines de goma que se lanzan, digamos, en contra de la gente, y está lleno todo el camino. Ustedes ven para allá, está todo. O
O sea, ¿cómo uno puede entender, digamos, en qué sociedad estamos viviendo?
We can't fight in any way that has perfected its methods of proliferation by armed conflict, by perpetrating violence, and by making people live in fear. So what's going on here is we're learning to walk without fear, and we all know how to do that as indigenous peoples, as original peoples. We know the power of peace. We know where that comes from, where our sovereignty inheres from. And it comes from the land, the water, the universal elements for us to stand in peace and in prayer without backing down.
We know what belongs to us, and we know what we have to keep for our children and our grandchildren. Dakota means friend and ally. This is Dakota territory. This is treaty territory. This is where you agreed not to come.
It's time I urgently reiterate the critical significance of protecting Indigenous peoples' full, unencumbered access to clean water on our territories.
Sin un respeto integral a la vida y autonomía de los pueblos indígenas en Colombia, no habrá paz.
This is sacrilegious. It's destroying our mother. So the sacredness of water, the power of water, is what we need to understand.
Fuerza, ánimo, harto cariño, que nunca se dejen vencer, que nunca se dejen dominar. Así que, maíz y huevo.
Thank you so much for your time and being here today. Questions and answers if you have time or you're interested. I would just need to change. It takes me 2 minutes though, so if you want to, we can do that. Is that an idea or? Yes. Okay, I'll go change. This can stay here.
I'm talking about technologies of resistance that we already know, and I see it in the court. But what else? Where else do you see it?
So the technologies of resistance stuff that I'm engaging in comes out of Chela Sandoval, and Chela Sandoval writes about methodologies of the oppressed and how many different oppressed groups have come up with methodologies of resistance that are effective in that time and place. And for instance, corn, like in Colombia and in many, many parts of the Americas, I actually don't know about up here, but it grows so much, and we have a lot of it, and our diets can just consist mainly of corn and beans. And it's enough food, and it sustains you. And so it's very important, the corn, and I think in other parts of the world it is too. So for me, going to the knowledge that we have about what is sustaining us can develop technologies of resistance. But to just try to fight in a way that doesn't go to where you're sustained or really where you're nurtured, you know, it's not gonna build the kind of community or join with the kinds of communities that are in resistance already. And so to just find ways to go to the methodologies of oppressed people that are so many and are described in a lot of different places, and then listen and then get engaged with people who are working on resistance, resurgence, and change. I don't know if that helped. Yeah.
I have a question, and I'm curious about what you think about like our imagination about technologies is so bound in how we met them, right? Which is through capitalism. But in Chile before the coup, when we had our short experiment with democratic socialism,
yes,
there was a project that was designed, but it wasn't put into place. Project Cinco. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it was like a precursor of the internet. It was a system of centralized production with input from the workers. It was like a model of the internet, but thinking of a different goal. So instead of profit, it was kind of like democratizing production or the economy, right?
Yes.
And it blew my mind when I found it, because we tend to just think that this is the only ways that technology can exist, whereas, I don't know. What do you think about that?
That's why I use the word technologies of resistance and not methodologies, because it's easily, you could say methodologies of resistance, but there's so many different ways that technology can be used and has been used, and it's very old. Technology is old. Things really change after the clock, the dimension of the clock, and but obviously technology predates all that. And there's really good independent telephony projects that are happening and that are not part of these grids of data gathering. And there's other kinds of projects that are trying to, for instance, make heat come out of certain ways of arranging your food waste. Things like that. Those are technologies. And they're very much more beneficial technologies that don't make anyone rich, and so they don't run the world. But I think with the Technosphere, where it's at right now, it's pretty extensive, and these other technologies are going to become much more important, because those electric grids and all that stuff, it's going to get into some serious problems, right? And so it's not saying, like you're saying, it's looking at technology and saying, all right, what about the technologies of resistance that we've used and that have worked, and that we can go back to, and technologies of resurgence too, of looking at ways to approach the world differently. For me, one of the big addictions in the cult of the Techno-Logic is convenience. I don't know anybody that doesn't love convenience, including me. Hey, I can call anybody. If I can afford that cell phone, I can call somebody. That's convenient. It's not like going home or going to a phone booth or any of that. But the price we're paying for that convenience is monstrous. And so I think there are really good technology projects, and they're very much not about making profits, and they're very differently structured.
Thank you.
I want to know something. I want to know if
your glass is half full or half empty. And I'm wondering, you know, how do you see things actually going? What's the feeling in your bones about where we're going to be in 10 years, in 30 years down the road? Are you apocalyptic or what?
I was not apocalyptic. I went to perform with Adam Zaretsky at the Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, which is a meeting of scientists and artists. And what I learned there was extremely alarming. And I don't talk about it publicly at all, ever, because they don't talk about it. And that sounds conspiratorial, it's not. The reason is because they don't know, no one knows. They suspect these things are gonna happen. They're very frightened these things are gonna happen. But who knows, right? And so I became more alarmed as a result of talking to scientists and meeting scientists that are very frightened at this point. But I also hang out in this group of people called the multi-species group and the emergent ecologies. And it's the focus is, right, things are changing and they're always changing. And so what is emergent out of the changes that are particularly around climate change? What is emerging then? Because there's still emerging things. It's not like Earth is over. So I kind of hang with the emergent and the multi-species folks that look at all these different, from a species lens, like, oh, look, there's all these other proliferations happening. And so you can't be apocalyptic or grim, because there's other proliferations and other arrangements, and maybe other arrangements of power too are gonna come out of it. And so, I mean, personally at home, I mean, I feel kind of sad a lot because I'm old. I see myself as old, and I got to benefit from like seeing a beautiful world, and especially in Colombia, where there's no more glaciers. And the Kogi people their glaciers have all melted. And I feel sad, because until now, that's been there, at least in their oral history of the last 5,000 years. So I feel sad. I feel sad for people who are very young, because they're not going to have this water and these things. There's already lakes frying up in Bolivia and that people talk about it like, and maybe you all know all this, they talk about it like, I've lost my mother and my father, the lake is gone. What are we gonna, so I just feel sad personally. And I also feel, responsible, like accountable to young people. And so I try to work a lot with young people on imaginaries and creativity and resistance and resurgence.
You said that technology is sort of devastating social movements, but as a younger person, I've almost had this idea that maybe the internet and technology provides a space for people to speak because it's not as monitored as some other things. What do you think of this perspective in terms of what you see?
Well, I mean, I think I guess the part that worries me is, for social movements, is if you're using social media, it's tricky, because the most effective Black Lives Matter account on Facebook was not run by Black Lives Matter. It was fake. It was run by Russian trolls that wanted to manipulate a group of people in that city. And so it wasn't actually run by Black Lives Matter at all. And now, weirdly, they did get people to go to protests that they organized. But they weren't actually Black Lives Matter protests. And then, so on the one hand, the ability to generate profiles that are fake, and the bot activity, the social bots, and the ability of social bots to convince the other human that the social bot is a human when it's just a bot. And the third thing is that if all your communications are done that way, for instance, one thing I was watching a lot was the Arab Spring, because so much of the Arab Spring happened through social media accounts. And all of it was traceable to addresses and GPS points and who was with who when, because their phones all have all the data. And you can go delete every single thing in your phone, and unless you smash it to bits with a hammer, it's all there. It doesn't matter. And so that you're providing GPS coordinates for every single person you're meeting with, not just you, could get other people killed. That's what worries me. And it's already happening, right? And so, on the one hand, communication is extremely important, and getting people involved is extremely important, and spreading the word is extremely important. On the other hand, if every person in that room can be GPS coordinated when they walked in, when they walked out, where they went, what GPS coordinates of who they met with, traced to those individuals' home addresses. You know, and I mean, one group that does a lot with that is the Israeli military, but I mean, they practically don't need to, because they have many other ways to do things to Palestinian people. But, like, for instance, the Israeli military broke the airlock system last year. And that's how Laura Petras protected the files of Snowden when she was making the documentary. She created an airlock that you couldn't get into that computer. Well, they figured out that the fan gives away the rate your fan of your computer is pulsing, gives out the binary code and the ASCII code that you can rebuild in another computer and find out everything on that computer. So the traceability is problematic because there's too much violence on the parts of states or non-state actors too. And so it's a conundrum. I think it's a real conundrum. And it depends where you're at, because if you're in a country that routinely kills activists, like I am, that's not really what you want to be doing. But if you're in a country that does not routinely kill activists with impunity, obviously, and since the peace accords were signed in Colombia last year, one indigenous earth guardian water protector is killed every single week. So that's where I'm from. So no, you don't use these things. Yeah, GPS coordinates, well then you're gonna go kill 5 other people, right? So you have to be more careful and tactical. So I think it depends on place and where you're situated and what's happening but that data is forever. Because the data banks are now massive. It costs them nothing to keep your data forever. So 10 years from now, they're like, now what were they doing in 2018? Do I want to hire this person for this job or give them health care? Oh, look, they were doing this and this and this and this and this. I don't think so. So it's complicated.
So, to your point of convenience.
Yes.
So, what I hear when you talk about that is that certain kinds of possibilities and relationships are being facilitated.
Mm-hmm.
But I also hear in your presentation that other types of possibilities and relational modes are available, but they're not as obvious to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in your work, are there certain kinds of things that you're sort of attempting to reinvigorate? So one of the things that strikes me, right, is face-to-face relating, right? But, you know, like, can you expand on that? Like, you know, when you think about resurgence, when you think about revitalization, like, what are some of the things that you're imagining? You know, sort of new directions. Obviously, when you talk about multi-species interactions, I mean, those are not convenient
necessarily.
No, they're not.
Right? But there are practices, right? People can learn something about that. But I'm just interested in hearing sort of some of your how-tos, right?
Wow.
Some of your necro-techno jamming.
I mean, a lot of what I do is ask other people to imagine face-to-face and to try face-to-face more often. Like, face-to-face is hard. It's super hard. And if you don't agree on everything, it's even harder. And so it's way easier to attack people maybe doing good work and ignorant about maybe an area of the work, very ignorant, but maybe also doing good work. And it's very easy to just slaughter them quickly. And what does that do? Because you're taking out too many people and you might be third next in line. Because ignorance is our state. So you're not up on everything, right? So I encourage a face-to-face a lot, and I do it in my performances, and it's hard. It's hard for me. I feel worried about what I'm doing to people. Like as soon as I taped your mouth, I thought, oh, that tastes so disgusting. When he takes it all, Christ. You know, I'm aware that I'm doing that, and I'm also looking at people, and then I try to go back and acknowledge, like I know I did this, but it, you know, I want to look at you and acknowledge that it was in that moment, but we're going somewhere else with this. And people that I taped, and so there's a lot of aspects to it. Like, it's not nostalgia, and it's not anti-tech, and it's not anti. It's pro. It's pro things that we're shaking out. It's shaking out, right? Social media and all this stuff is shaking out right now. Like, okay, young people hate Facebook, right? For instance, they are much more interested in these other interactive spaces. But at the same time, like a lot of young people, very young people, are spending like all their time on screens, and they're getting sick actually. And so, how do we like reinvigorate it? And I think one of my biggest practices is re-engaging with the planetary. The planetary. That sounds so weird, but I'm convinced that colonialism, capitalism, and these modes of economic exploitation and just destruction of human joy, that they want one of the aims is to make these bodies feel alien on this planet. To alienate bodies from planetary life. And it's through all these different tricks, you know, to get you alienated. So I engage a lot in myself, in planetary life. What is planetary life? Like, even if it's, how do I go somewhere and work with some people that are doing some planetary activity, like growing some corn or doing some, like, let me get in there and, you know, and do it, because I feel the risk of this alienation allows tremendous violence on Earth by the world. So the world does huge amounts of violence on Earth, and it's not like a naive take, you know, it's much more of a, I'm not alien to this planet, why am I convinced, who did I let convince me of that? Because it's pretty cool, this planet. Yeah. And generally I ask people their things. I don't often talk about my things. Because I'm interested in what they're doing and how they're working together in their community, in their situation, and what are the roadblocks and how are they trying to re-engage, you know, especially after I've been an activist since I was 12 years old, or maybe even younger, and the bitterness of some of the fights. Pretty bad. And how do you re-engage after that 10 years later? Because we need each other.
I have a question to the idea of the weight, right? Being an activist or being a person who has a great deal of understanding of the weight of what's happening. How do you deal with that, especially as a performance artist too, is bringing that to your audience and also for yourself and your own self-protection, right? Because that can be very draining. That can make you, at least, extremely, extremely sad, right? So yourself personally, how do you deal with that?
Like, for instance, I try to hold back a lot of what I've learned in 22 years or 25 years of research on this topic. Because a lot of it is just extremely debilitating and frightening. So why share that, right? And also you have to really research this to understand all the ramifications. So I don't even share all that. And then I cry a lot because I cry in public. I cried after class today because I'm just moved by the people who want to keep trying. Really move me. And I don't have a single iota of hope. I don't have a single iota of hope. Hope means nothing to me because the way I see hope used is as a futurity. Like, if we do this, the future's right here and now. What? So I live in wonder, and I let wonder kind of bathe me with tears, because I am full of wonder that people are doing things and trying things and engaging and trying to make connections and make changes and take the sacrifices, and it's a state of wonder. So it's a different operating approach of activism. I have no hope, but I have a lot of wonder, and wonder is more joyful for me than hope.
Because hope usually results in an expectation, right? And an expectation lost is the defeat, right? So it's the cyclical thing, right?
Right.
Or hope is being in wonder is a much, I think, more sustainable state because you can always be constantly surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And moved. I'm moved. I'm even moved in an evening like tonight when I'm interacting with people aggressively and I look in their eyes and I see what's going on and then I see that they forgive me. Because they could just punch me in the face. Right? And they don't. And there's a reason that's happening, but I'm moved by that. I'm moved, and I'm scared that I'm re-traumatizing somebody's trauma. And then I try to be careful about that. If I'm looking at someone and I be careful and then address it. And but lots of stuff fills me with wonder. Like that I don't get pinched in the face more often is one of them. I'm just kidding, but you know what I mean. I can stay another minute or not. It's up to you. I'm good to go too. Thank you. I mean, if it's a good time to wrap it up. Seem like a good time to wrap it up?
Thank you.
Thank you.